Dr. Hooker, an awful lot of what you wanted to create space for, facilitate, welcome young people into is the development of critical consciousness. And I guess as we anticipate folks watching this around the world, we should just pause to unpack what you mean by critical consciousness.
There's a sociologist named Pierre Bourdieu, and he has this wonderful expression, which is, it goes without saying because it came without saying, which is that much of what we inherit, many of the structures that we inherit, the inequities, the hierarchies, the exclusions that are built into them don't have to be taught. We experience them, we live into them, they become the water in which we live. A critical consciousness gives us the capacity to analyze, to notice, and to navigate those in ways that begin to open up, to deconstruct, and to challenge, and believe that the systems can be different, that our hierarchies can be deconstructed. And so we need a set of skills and a framework. Like, how do we know from the margins who's allowed to be in this space? How do we know when we're privileged and others are not? We almost always recognize when we're being oppressed, but never know when we're being privileged towards someone else's oppression. And so the necessity of critical consciousness as an aspect, as a vital, fundamental even aspect of the performance of Christianity, is to say that this is supposed to deconstruct hierarchy. This is supposed to deconstruct all the places of exclusion. And we need to have the practices associated with it. We need to have a framework associated with it. And so Paulo Freire, the brilliant Brazilian education specialist and liberation education specialist, in his Pedagogy of the Oppressed, describes conscientization, like how do we use the arts and theater as a methodology to allow us to explore some of these places that we otherwise would want to challenge. How do we name those challenges and then use engagement, particularly for youth, in art and language and poetry, and using slam poetry and music as a way of investigating and analyzing these different exclusions and hierarchies that they would otherwise not support. And so you're giving them and creating the opportunities, particularly in those youth ministry spaces, where they're not compelled to listen to the adult, when the adults don't get to determine the standard for understanding. There's not a imposed narrative. They get to explore and question and deconstruct and then use art and creativity and body movement and so forth as ways of doing it, so that they recognize that the performance, the way of being Christian, actually requires a critical consciousness and understanding an untransformed or a transformed mind that doesn't necessarily align with the narratives of the world.